if you think somebody's got it figured out, that might change next week, right? That's how fast things are. So today, this is very personal for me because this is about talking about Augment's own AI native transformation and what that was like, what are the mistakes that we made, and talk about some of the lessons that we learned. So let me take us back to the November 2025 moment. Who kind of remembers this moment? Like maybe quick show of hands. Yeah, there's a lot of hands out there, right? So I remember this very clearly because as someone building in AI, November 2025, we were working with Anthropic to try to launch Opus. At the time, it felt like just another model. It didn't feel anything special. Evals were good. We're churning out another model. And then in December, I started having, I meet with the team pretty regularly. I was having one-on-ones with the team. And something had fundamentally shifted, right? Independently in my one-on-ones, a number of what I consider to be really gifted software programmers all told me it no longer makes sense for them to write code by hand. And I was like, wait, what shifted? Like, this is the team that's always been using agents. And for them, I think a couple of things shifted. Agents were getting much better at following instructions reliably. I think that's one. So they were starting to trust them a lot more. With Augment's context engine, you get the context of the whole code base. So there's hallucinations have dropped quite a bit. So they could now reliably have agents go run tasks for much longer. So that felt different than a continuum. I think that's one thing that changed. The second thing is this graph. I'm curious, how many of you have seen this plot before? Maybe a show of hands if you've seen it before. OK, I see a couple of hands. So let me walk you through. So there's an organization called METR that plots capabilities of models on a log scale. So even though it looks linear, it's actually an exponential. And you'll notice that going all the way back from 2020, they're plotting the capabilities of models on their ability to solve tasks for longer durations of time, right? And you'll notice something very interesting. So we all knew we were in an exponential, but this is the most clear evidence of like agents continues to improve at an exponential. And the really interesting part, if you look at the more recent models, Opus 4.6, GPT 5.5, they're actually improving at a rate faster than an exponential, right? Some people are calling it the super exponential, right? So what does it actually mean? By end of this year, so let's say that's 1 year from Opus 4.5, we're going to have agents that are 10x more capable than Opus 4.5. So if you thought Opus 4.5 in November was a moment where software developers said, holy crap, it doesn't make sense for me to write code by hand anymore, think about what the world would look like when you have agents that are 10x more capable than Opus 4.5. That's what I think we're very much on track for, right? Now, take everything I said and then sit with this slide for a second. I talk to engineering leaders a lot, and everybody's like, I gave my entire team agents, and they have the best agents. They have the most frontier agents. I'm expecting 2 to 3x in productivity, but instead, I get 20 to 30% in productivity. And this is us, by the way, an AI company that's at the tip of the spear. And this was us back in December, and something didn't make sense. And you heard Gregor talk about bottlenecks. I think this is where the way to think about this is AI transformation does not happen with just individuals transforming. For an AI transformation to happen, you need the whole system to change, right? You need to go after the bottlenecks. And I'll talk a little bit about our own journey where it was a wake-up call for us where we were at 20 to 30%, and we had to go through a bunch of things to get to 2 to 3x. So that's what this journey is about. So let me lay out a couple of realizations we learned along the way. So first thing, you saw in Gregor's talk, we talked about what AI native means. We asked this question ourselves. Interestingly enough, nobody spends time really sitting with this question. Everybody operates as if it's an understood statement, right? Of course we are AI native. Go talk to any leader, they'll say, of course we are AI native. But then the next question, OK, can you tell me what AI native means? And then you'd get 5 different answers in the same organization, right? And we had the same thing too. Some folks on my team said, yeah, of course I'm AI native. I'm using chat. I'm chatting with the agent all the time, right? And then I had other folks on my team that were orchestrating multiple agents in parallel to have multiple tasks running at the same time. And then the final stage, or at least for now, because I don't think AI native is a destination, it's more a journey. If you look at the final stage, which I call agents running autonomously, that is fundamentally different from someone that's chatting with an agent, right? When agents are running autonomously and when you're pulling in humans at the right most critical moments, the way your team operates then is very, very different from someone working with Cloud Code or Cursor or Augment Code in a one task at a time fashion. I think that's myth number one. So as an organization, the first thing is for you to internalize that AI native is not a destination, it's a journey, and the journey keeps changing as the capabilities are evolving. The second myth, I think this is a little bit more around engineering leadership, but I think it's very applicable with agents today, is the second myth is that you think you can drive this transformation top down. And we saw this in 2025 everywhere, right? Every org leader basically came out and said, everybody's adopting agents. This is an OKR. I'm going to track adoption. In fact, there are companies that said, I'm going to make this part of your performance evaluation. And guess what? People adopted agents, but the organizations did not transform. And why is that? If you think about what we are up against, right? This is not just changing one behavior. It's actually about changing the whole system, right? And I think it's human nature to resist change, and it's actually human nature to resist change that's forced upon you. So if anybody tries to force you to use agents, what is it that you're going to do? The first time you run into a problem, you want to go back to your manager and say, I told you this wouldn't work, right? And that started happening everywhere. And so to me, I think if you're thinking about this as a transformation, you really need bottom-up buy-in. You need your team to fully internalize why this is important for them, so that as new issues happen, as new bottlenecks emerge, they're not waiting for some kind of top-down direction. Instead, they are thinking from first principles. They're working together collaboratively and trying to figure out how to take one bottleneck at a time, because I can guarantee you the bottleneck is going to keep shifting. The third thing I'll say, we've blogged about this a little bit too, which is there's a mistake I think an engineering leader can make in thinking that this is entirely a technical problem. So what do I mean by that? So a lot of folks are like, oh, I'm going to bring the next best tool. Oh, right now, Cursor is the best tool, I'm going to bring it. Oh, next Cloud Code is the next thing, I'll go bring it. While a tool is important, right? And that's what, we built Cosmos in many ways to help tackle this current problem. I don't think it's enough. A tool is just something that will help you accelerate on a particular journey, but you really need to tackle the human side too. And we ran this survey where about 219 engineering leaders participated. And in one of the questions, we asked them, what are the things that you fear the most right now? 89% of them, of engineers out there, fear that their skills will become irrelevant. Right? That's basically 9 out of, a majority of the population out there is feeling this. They probably haven't voiced it enough, right? And if somebody is in this mental state and it's not acknowledged, their willingness to embrace something new is going to be very much inhibited. So as an engineering leader, this is something I think you need to really think about, that you can't just bring in a new tool and expect some kind of a transformation to happen. You do need to be thinking about the people side of what this transformation looks like. So with that, I'll walk us through a number of things that we did. Some failed, some succeeded, but here are some of the learnings that distilled from our own journey. My hope is, I'm sure every journey is different. My hope in sharing this is that you can accelerate your own journey from our mistakes and benefit from that, right? So the first one, I would say, it seems obvious in hindsight, is really slow down to speed up, right? And the best analogy that comes to mind is even a Formula One car that's really in a hurry has to slow down when it wants to make a turn. And I think that is very much true for organizations as well. But when I talk to CTOs, they're like, but I'm too busy. I have too much going on. I have a roadmap to go deliver. But guess what? If you don't slow down and if you actually don't create the space for your teams, you're going in the wrong direction, right? So you're going really fast, but you're going in the wrong direction. That's not going to get you anywhere, right? So what did we do? So back in February, we actually took 2 full days to do a Eng offsite, and we organized it in this way. So day 1 was a hackathon, and I told the team there's only 2 sort of constraints to think about. One, whatever you're hacking on, you're building entirely with agents. That's it, only agents. And the second thing was the theme for the hackathon was 10x your agent, 10x your team, 10x yourself, right? And it was meant to sort of inspire ideas where folks are willing to lean in. And then everybody leaned in, and the amount of ideas created were amazing, right? Like what you can build with agents today in one day is fascinating. But day 2 to me was, day 1 was all about setting us up for day 2. And day 2 was a lot more important from my point of view, which is we opened day 2 by using a Mentimeter. I don't know if folks, anybody familiar with Mentimeter? So I see only a couple of hands. So Mentimeter is this live visualization thing where you can ask a large group of audience a question, and they can answer this live, and you have no idea what's going to come out. It's just going to show up on the screens, and you have to go with it. And my question for the team was, what feelings is everybody sitting with right now, having gone through a day of hackathon, but also what's the whole industry is going through? And I didn't know what to expect. I saw 2 stories happening in parallel. Like one was about there was fear, uncertainty. Side by side, there was curiosity and excitement. And these were the big, bold letters in terms of what my team was feeling at that particular moment in time, right? And something interesting happened just when everybody saw this. The first thing that happened was everybody sort of felt that they were not alone. There's something very powerful about seeing on the screen what you're feeling and knowing that, holy crap, it's not just me. Everybody in the team is feeling this way. So I guess I'm not alone in this journey, right? So there's something interesting about that I think truly liberated the team in ready to engage in the next step, right? So after the first half, we engaged the team also on the human side in a very interesting problem-solving way. I talked about how top-down does not work in this AI transformation. So we asked the team 2 questions. One was a tooling question, which is, what do we think we need for agents to be more productive? So everybody broke into breakout groups, and then everybody spent about 30 minutes thinking about what needs to happen. And the second question we asked was more on the people question, which is, what are some of the new behaviors that we need to adopt as a team? I didn't prescribe anything. I essentially asked the team to go think about, hey, what does this look like for you, right? You're the ones that are living this day to day. What does it look like? And what you see on the right side is what the teams came up with, right? The teams sort of came up and said, look, with agents producing a lot of code, and if anybody that's used agents, they're really good at duplicating a bunch of stuff. They're not at a place where you can just one-shot everything. Verification is a very, very important step. So we talked about verification as a new bottleneck. The second thing, the team identified that spec clarity is the highest leverage. In this world, I think you have to be thinking about where do humans can provide the highest leverage. Specs is super high leverage because once you iterate with an agent on producing a really high quality spec, you can actually then trust the agent to go execute on that spec, right? So that was something that the team came up with. Code review, we all know that folks that have adopted agents, everybody ran into the code review bottleneck, and I'll talk about this in a little bit. But we knew that the AI code review solutions out there today were not meeting the need because all of the code review solutions out there, like they're optimizing for a human being on the receiving end. And therefore, what they do is they actually optimize for precision over recall, right? So they want to surface the most important things so that the humans don't get annoyed, but they might miss a bunch of other bugs because they don't want to annoy the humans. But if you think about agents benefiting from a code review of another agent, the way you define that problem and the product is very different, right? In fact, our code review, we tried to use a different model than the model that wrote the code so that the diversity actually helps in surfacing a bunch of different bugs. And the other interesting insight, I think, is agents amplify both the good and the bad. So it's even more important that you don't have, like, made a blog about this. It's actually better to not have an agents.md file than have an incorrect one or something that's like dated, because it actually throws off the agent. So that's something that the team went and cleaned up on their own because of this exercise that we did. The second learning, I think this is, I was chatting with someone earlier today. They were talking about theory of constraints and how that's coming back in becoming very popular now. There's a book called The Goal by Eliyahu Goldratt. It's a fascinating book. Highly recommend checking it out, which talks about, the throughput of the system is governed by its slowest link, right? If you think about software engineering, for as long as software existed, coding was the bottleneck until now, right? And as agents get better and better, and they're going to keep getting better at solving the coding problem, the thing to remember is your throughput only increases based on your slowest link. So if coding is no longer the bottleneck, where did it go? Where is the bottleneck shifting? That's something I think you need to be thinking about actively. For us, when we went through this and coming out of the offsite too, it became clear that I think I think when I talk to folks, this resonates a lot. It starts with coding, and then agents are generating a bunch of code. Pretty quickly, it becomes a code review bottleneck. And everybody is now met with this decision where, do I rubber stamp this code review? Because, now I'm becoming the bottleneck, and I'm under pressure to go keep going faster, right? But then if you keep rubber stamping it, you didn't write the code, you're rubber stamping it. What about confidence, right? Like, who's accountable for what's shipping in the code base? So you can't quite do that, so you need to reimagine what that looks like. And the interesting thing with testing, I would say, is we invested a bunch of energy in trying to make sure that agents have same access to what the humans have in terms of a testing harness, right? Because humans have invested a bunch of energy in developer VMs, in their own setup that allows them to test code in a very, very rich fashion. But then today we expect an agent in an IDE or like a CLI agent to just get to the same outcomes without that particular access. So this was an interesting learning for us where we invested a bunch of energy to do that. And taking down these bottlenecks one at a time really allowed us to get that step function change in that productivity. And a realization from all of this, I think, is you can do this piecemeal, right? You can sort of take down these things one at a time. But we felt like you really need a system that allows you to do all of this and take down future bottlenecks as and when they emerge, right? And that's kind of where I think when I think about this future where it's small teams of humans working with large teams of agents, you need a system that allows you to do that. And this system needs to learn from feedback. It needs to keep getting better as and when you give feedback. More importantly, this is a system where it's operating a lot more autonomously, and it knows when to bring the humans in. And the system should have capabilities where it's pulling in humans for the highest leverage moments, and it's doing what agents can do best. So what actually changed for us? Human role shifted fundamentally. So the way some of our teams work today, I'll give you a quick example of, let's say you have a piece of feedback that's coming in, and you're synthesizing that feedback, and then you're executing on that feedback, and then shipping it. In an agent-forward world, one way of working is a human's working with the feedback, a human's then synthesizing the problem, a human then works with a spec, and a human then implements the change and ships it, right? You see a lot of human interactions that are very interrupt-driven, whereas with Cosmos, this agent-forward way, the way you would want to do this is agents are autonomous, so agents are synthesizing the feedback, and they propose what, let's say, cluster of things that we want to be fixing, and the human then gets involved in prioritization. And when the human prioritizes, the agents go off and then do specs. But then we think spec review is a very human leverage moment, so the humans get involved in spec reviews. So they're doing the specs, and then you hand it back to the agents. And then you have a team of agents, so a PR author, an end-to-end tester, and a deep code review. They are working, iterating among themselves to produce a high-quality outcome. And then we introduced this thing called an intent review because we still think it's important for the humans to understand how the code base is evolving, right? Because ultimately the humans are responsible, the last line of defense. So the intent review is very much around understanding how is this particular PR modifying my code base? And you're now operating at the intent level, not at the line-by-line code level. That's what we think the future looks like, where humans and agents are collaborating to produce high-quality outcomes. This particular chart is actually, we use Vive for measuring our developer productivity. You'll notice that all the way up into February, we were still using agents, right? And then when the team started clicking into this new way of working, the velocity went up significantly. And I think a lot of this was enabled by just taking down one bottleneck at a time, and then having agents take on a lot more autonomous. The agents are much more in the driver's seat, with humans assisting wherever is needed. And the other important bit is, as you're providing feedback, agents keep getting better over time. So I'll probably close with a couple of slides, right? I think one is, when you think about the AI native transformation, there's so much more than adopting agents. And I think a number of engineering leaders are making the mistake of thinking, I just get the best tool and I'm done. I give it to my team and I'm done. And I think now is actually a really important moment for leaders to show up as true leaders, right? To really help navigate the ambiguity, provide the space for your team, give them psychological safety so that they can make mistakes, right? Give them the air cover so that they can truly experiment and learn. And so for me, I think when I think about what is needed here, AI native transformation is a system redesign problem. So if you're just thinking at an individual level, you're not going to get to the outcomes that you want. You need to be thinking at the system level. The second thing is, the throughput of the system is governed by its bottleneck. So think about bottlenecks. If coding is predominantly solved, where is the bottleneck going? I think this is something that you need to be very, very mindful of, and I can guarantee you it's going to keep shifting. It's not until at some point, I think maybe the capabilities of models saturate, and then maybe the bottlenecks will saturate, but until then, each system is going to have a different bottleneck. And the third thing, I can't emphasize the point about this being a human and a technical problem, right? Like everybody in software right now is going through a major identity crisis, and if you don't acknowledge that in your team, you're probably not getting a fully engaged team. I think that's something you have to think about, your own way of acknowledging it so that the team feels like you have their back. And therefore, that will then allow you to lean in much more into what this transformation should look like. So I'll probably leave you with two questions, and then hopefully you can block them some time to think about this, right? So 6 months from now, if the super exponential continues, right, we're going to have agents that are 10x better. What does your org shape look like to take full advantage of that? I think that's one thing for you to think about. And then the second question, I think, is where does human involvement have the highest leverage? Again, if you go back to thinking about in bottlenecks, if the humans are not working on the highest leverage opportunities, I can guarantee you they're going to become the bottleneck, right? So think about what that highest leverage looks like. And I can also say that the team that's going to really succeed in this journey is not the team that has the most amount of agents. It's the team that's really figured out to adapt their system so that humans and agents are working side by side together. So yeah, all the best on this journey. Thank you.